Hello, everyone. This is Belinda Carr. Welcome back to the Movers and Breakers podcast, where we dive into the world of construction and explore the stories of people and companies who are shaping the future of our industry. From the latest innovations to the challenges and triumphs of everyday professionals, we bring you the inside scoop of what's happening in construction. Today, I'm speaking with Curtis Fletcher, co-founder of PreFab Logic in Idaho. Thanks for joining us, Curtis.
Hi, thank you.
So we met in person last month or 2 months ago. This feels like this whole year is just flying by. But I visited you and your other co-founders at your factory in Idaho, and y'all were very, very gracious to host us and show us this amazing facility that y'all have built. And y'all have such an amazing vision for the future of construction, whether it's in terms of prefabrication or modular construction, or even the digital aspect of it. So could you give us a little bit of background into how you developed the company PreFab Logic?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I think the real foundation of PreFab Logic was the bridging of uh, of the workflow between a developer and a general contractor and the factory. And so the company is really founded around the premise that communication was difficult in most cases, where the factory as a manufacturer isn't always talking the same language as a developer or as a general contractor. And so to bring that together and make this cohesive environment where the factory can actually be successful at producing what needs to be produced for the job site and not have scope gap and other elements that would typically happen in an environment like this. So that was really the foundational element. And then of course, everything grew and we became more involved in BIM modeling and, executing at this higher level. So, but foundationally, that's a premise of the company.
Okay. What services does PreFab Logic offer?
So the company actually offers everything from early design assistance to the architect on a team to make sure that a project's going to be suitable for modular throughout the entitlement process, so that you're not trying to go backward and have an entitlement that doesn't work for modular, and then state approvals, project management. We also do very detailed integration of the models so that, we were very focused on robotics and automation in our line of work. And so because of that, we've become very well-versed in providing super detailed models that take everything into account, MVPs and how they penetrate through either sheathing or studs or anything else, and having exacting sort of information for every little detail. So we do that service as well, and shop drawings for certain factories. So we're really, everything it takes to actually manufacture the product is what PreFab Logic does, and the approval process for the states.
And it's difficult to mention everything that y'all do because it's so varied. I mean, y'all actually do sell plans and all that. That's a very basic element. But like you just described, y'all are actually building units for apartments. So the buildings, the BIM side, the BIM models that you developed with your team, that's specific to the apartment units that y'all create in your factory. But y'all are also consultants for other companies. You'll help them understand how the prefab world works, how the modular world works, and how to decide what projects can actually be turned into like modular units.
That's correct. Yeah, we do. We're part of it is actually understanding, what each factory that we might be working with, because PreFab Logic actually works with a lot of different manufacturers out throughout the country. We're very manufacturer agnostic, if you will. We don't really just go to one manufacturer. In fact, normally our clients will want us to work with several manufacturers to see who is the best fit for the particular product that they want to manufacture. But all of those services allow each of those manufacturers to be successful in the project that they're trying to provide to the customer. And it's a benefit to those factories because they actually get that complete knowledge that we get from working on so many different projects every year. So we're usually, a little ahead of the curve on R&D and other things that are happening in the world to get the best result possible.
That's a that's a very interesting point because you all are not involved in the actual construction of it, but being a consultant, you're talking about absorbing all this knowledge out in the field that's making you better at being consultants in a way.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's super helpful to actually be we happen to have access directly to a factory full time, which gives us that ability to go down on the manufacturing floor and understand, how something is really working for that person that's actually doing that fabrication, right, or that assembly. What made it better for them, and then also having the tradespeople from the outside that are going to put this together come in and work with us to make sure that they're getting what they need so that when it gets delivered to the job site, they're going to be successful, right? And then
Yeah.
we'll also travel to the job site and check that too, do the same thing.
How did you get into this niche role? Were you, I assume you've grown up on construction sites and you've been in the construction industry for a very long time, but did you identify the need for prefabrication really early on and that kind of took you down this more digital path, the BIM world?
I'll date myself here a little bit. I mean, I started as a drafter in the early '80s, doing pencil and vellum and drawing for an RV company, doing design development
Oh,
for
that's
the
an interesting
manufacturing.
industry.
Yeah, it is an interesting industry, and I spent about 7 years in that group and got into information systems management, doing different things for them and introduced CAD into that group. And that was the beginning of CAD at that time. But then, over time, I kept moving, I moved into manufactured housing and then into big multifamily housing. When I got into large scale multifamily is when Ashley was introduced to Revit, which was right when it was purchased by Autodesk, and then so we've taken that, and of course that's grown over the years as well. So I wouldn't say I necessarily had an epiphany that the digital time was going to come and this was going to be this great thing. It just has evolved because my career has taken this path down the manufacturing environments. I've always been in product development and product design and manufacturing and management. So that's put us just in this great position to deliver on these things. But it's a great thing to see, especially for the young folks that want to really get into this space and the digital world, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So when we were at your factory, your team showed us this amazing digital twin almost that you all have created of a multifamily housing building. I mean, everything was in it. MEP structure, every component of the building was incorporated into this BIM model. And I mean, it's pretty typical in most construction firms now to have a digital twin. But what what feedback have you received from clients about how helpful that has been out on the job site?
That's a great question actually, because we recently had a case where I'll give you a good for instance. A lot of the products that we will design and manufacture are double loaded corridor kind of modules, right? So think of a hotel with a corridor going down the middle. You got rooms on both sides, right? So most of the apartment buildings are done in the same form. But the work that goes on in that corridor for the MEP work, for instance, that's going down through there. If you imagine, a lot of that's happening in the ceiling compartment above, and while that's being in the digital twin phase of the development, we're able to actually make sure that everything's going to fit. In particular, we're trying to stay above an 8 foot, ceiling, right? It's really important to to the environment for that particular hotel, the feel of it, right? And so we plan all that out. and we offer that to the job site. And it's interesting when you get out to the job site, if the sub trades and the contractors have not utilized that model properly to actually understand exactly where everything goes, and then
Whoops,
they
now
go,
it's now 6 feet high.
yeah, now they're at 7.6 or something of that sort, and they didn't utilize the information that was in front of them. Whereas when it is utilized, they're very successful. But they can get parts lists and they can get all these things that actually benefit them. We can't, unfortunately, you can't force people to utilize this technology out on the job site and take advantage of the things that they should be taking advantage of. But that's where we're trying to help with that early training for the general contractors and subcontractors, is bringing them into the mix early so they know what's available to them. They know that that data is there and they can actually use that to reduce their time on the job site. If you have trades, and so if you start, and the labor issue is pretty, relatively
Yeah,
large issue in the job market, right? And so if you think about a lot of the trades not having skill sets necessarily, or the tribal knowledge of why you do what you do, a picture is worth 1,000 words, because you don't have a lot of people to train them either, right? And so, to be
absolutely.
efficient, you
Yeah,
want that person to know what's going to happen. And if they can get a model that they can pull up on their phone or their iPad and they can actually see what's supposed to happen there, it's tremendously helpful, right? And making sure that they're going to be successful in
absolutely.
executing.
Yeah, because I mean, you learn how to read plans in school, or
Right.
when you're getting a degree, but it's different when you're out in the work field. It can be really confusing, especially like you said, if you don't
Absolutely.
have a mentor teaching you how to read these plans and the layers of information in them. But and we're visual beings, and we also, like you said, the next generation is just it even more visual than we are. For them to be able to walk through the model, or even like have it as an augmented reality where they're walking through the construction site
Yep.
and can see it and visualize and understand it, there's going to be hopefully smaller room for error.
That's correct. Yeah, it's a major, in my view, it's a major breakthrough for the time that we are in, to have somebody that doesn't have, has relatively limited exposure or experience. It's almost like a training tool.
Yeah,
It kind of is what you're alluding to there. It's just, that gives them an opportunity to learn something that otherwise would take somebody that's got 30 years of experience to tell them this is how you do it and why you do it, right?
yeah.
I mean, I suppose the downside is that maybe they're not learning the why, but they're learning the how,
And the how,
right?
yeah. Maybe they
So,
can
which,
figure out the why themselves in
yeah,
time. Yeah,
exactly, right?
hopefully.
Yeah.
So you've been, like we said earlier, you've been in this industry for a while. You've seen different aspects of it. I have to ask you, did you see a major shift in the industry in the last 3 years after the pandemic? It seemed like we were kind of heading towards prefabrication and modular, but I spoke to another guy on my podcast who called it the redheaded stepchild, like being in prefabrication, because everyone kind of scoffed at the idea and said, oh, it'll never really take off. But over the last 3 years, it's become everyone wants to do it. Everyone sees the value in it. And it's probably helped your business a lot too.
Yeah. What's in, and I read something recently that I thought was interesting. It wasn't really pointedly at this topic, but it really talked about how a lot of the time and energy from a um, marketing perspective or a sales perspective that people put into saying, modular will reduce the cost of construction. And while in some cases this is true, it really isn't the primary selling point of why you should do modular. I mean, there's a host of reasons, including, not having all of the disturbance on the job site and all these other things that you would normally hear about in the modular construction industry. But it really comes down to risk mitigation, and the fact that from a manufacturing standpoint, you can lock in a price. You can know exactly what this thing is going to cost you at a particular given time, and you can know that it's going to be delivered.
Mhm.
And if that content is, say, 70% of your project, here's what you can know. You can know that 70% of your project is locked in, and that is what it's going to cost you, and you know it, and the bank knows it, and that you can bank on, right? What you can't bank on is the other 30% of subcontractors not showing up or going bankrupt on you, or not getting the trades in there to do what needs to be done, and then actually delivering on a project instead of 30 months, maybe you're delivering on it in you know 18 to 24 months,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're shaving this time out of it. Very hard for, especially now that interest rates have gone up, for a contractor to make good money on a project if this thing is going to drag out for 30 months. How are we going to shift that to where we can bring it down and then also know that our cost is going to be what it's supposed to be?
Yeah. This seems like the perfect transition to this. I have to ask you about this analogy or comparison of construction to the automotive industry. I feel like whenever people talk about prefabrication, they're just so critical of construction and they constantly bring up Tesla or in general just the automotive industry and say how have they figured it out, how their assembly line is so clean and so efficient, and why can't we do that with construction? But like you just said, there are so many more variables in construction, whether like you said, it's other contractors coming in late or going bankrupt, or there are other variables that we deal with that the automotive industry doesn't. Not saying that they don't have their own concerns, but it's a unique problem. We can learn from them. I'm sure you have in with prefab logic and your modular building. You all have adapted a lot of technology from the automotive industry and their assembly line, but it's not a one-to-one comparison.
No, no, unfortunately it's not. It's starting in the RV industry, we were able to do things very repetitively, right? You can build, you have, 8 models, and this is what you're building, and it's very much automotive like in that respect. If you think about them, especially in the multifamily business like we are, you're really dealing with buildings, and in those buildings, you're going to have a boiler room, you're going to have a janitor's room, you're going to have elevators, you're going to have maybe, let's say that you only have 5 unit types, but then you have end conditions where you have windows on the side of the building and instead of just the ends. And so you get all these variables, and depending on what level you are on in that building, say it's a 5-story building, even though the units may look the same, structurally, they're very different as you go up through that building. There's a lot of different criteria that's happening in the structure of the building. So all these unique variables make manufacturing of
On
these
a
types
large
of
scale.
products,
Yeah.
yeah, just very, very much, it is very varied, if you
Yes.
will. And so even for us, what we've done, we built an automated manufacturing facility, but that manufacturing, all that automation had to be very um, capable of moving from this object to this object to this object within certain parameters. You had to be able to manufacture custom, one-off, sort of bespoke product every day and get decent volume out of it in order to make money,
Yeah.
right? If you can't, factories have to be profitable.
Yeah.
If it's not profitable, it's not going to be there, right? And so the big thing is to try to get as standardized as you can, but knowing that you're never going to get 100% like an automotive sort of facility.
So speaking of standardization, there's this concept DFMA, Design for Manufacturing and Assembly. And the idea is that you can create unique buildings, but the components of the buildings are standardized. So
Yes.
again, it's an interesting concept. It's very hard to turn that into reality given the changing parameters in construction and how each site is unique and building codes are different. But how have y'all played around with the idea of DFMA?
Um, we played around with it a lot. I mean, we execute on that every day, and because everything we do is set around that. However, setting aside the custom one-off buildings that we get all the time coming in to us. You have to realize that the buildings in the industry out there right now that are under contract or have been in entitlement process. If it's in California, it's been in entitlements for anywhere from 2 to 10 years, right? And so these designs go way back. There's this big pipeline of that type of stuff. So getting standardized products to fit within that is very difficult. But if we're starting today, which is one of the things we're really focused on in our product cycle is in Effective House is really focusing on standardized products and components, like what you mentioned, right? So if you think
So even
about,
if it's 2 years down the line,
yeah,
you're using the same components that you had designed for 2 years earlier.
yeah, yeah, we are, and that's like say a kitchen, right? If you got a 1 bedroom apartment, you're only going to do it so many ways, right? There's not a whole lot of variable that's going to happen, and so if I have maybe 3 or 4 kitchen types, and I have 3 or 4 bathroom types, and then I've got accessibility and adaptability planned into these things. I can use those components over and over and over again, and then have the building be in different shapes and configurations, right? Different widths of product, different, and so on. But then if I also standardize on module widths and certain elements like that, I can actually optimize manufacturing and the purchasing environment within those factories and these sorts of things, which help speed up manufacturing, right? And that's all you're trying to do. You're trying to speed up manufacturing to the greatest extent you can. If I can get one more module a day out of the factory with the same labor that we've got in the plant, that can drive the pricing down. If you can get 3 more out, drives it down more.
Like
These
you said,
things,
volume is important.
exactly. And then purchasing power and all these sorts of things, right? And so that's really where our focus is on. So from the sort of R&D and product side as a company is driving toward those deliverables over time. Because it's not, as you pointed out, you got to start here, and then maybe 2 years down the road, you start to see the net effect of that.
Yeah. So are there other companies, I'm sorry, other countries around the world that are kind of figured out prefabrication or modular construction a little bit better than we have? Is there some aspects of the way they build that we could learn from?
I think there's certain things, it's always interesting to go see how other people do it, right? I mean, there's never a time when you're not going to learn something from somebody else, right? And I hope that's true of everybody. But what we've done here with the automation, I think, is definitely next generation, and that's really pushing the envelope of manufacturing of this type of product with robotics. That whole scenario is very different, and there was no, when we created it, there was no off the shelf sort of design to do that type of thing. So there's no help desk. There's nobody to ask, right? We had to invent, and that was difficult. It's been very successful. I think the next one we do will be way more successful because my partner will say, we went to college on this one, which is what we did. We learned a lot, and now we're going to take that and, move on to our master's degree, right? So we're going from undergrad now, moving up, which I think is awesome.
Until the next
So
software comes along, or the next supply
exactly.
chain issue comes along, and then you're back at kindergarten.
Exactly. And it's funny. I'm glad you said that because it's one of the things I evaluate every year. We go through our software packages every year, and I'm always continually asking, is this the best we can do?
Yeah.
Or is there something better? And then you have all the criteria that gets applied to that question. But you always want to know, are you want to be on the edge, right? But trying not to be on the bleeding edge, but you want to be on the edge to make sure that, you're doing what is going to deliver the best product in the best time that you can.
There's this saying, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. There's no such thing
Right.
as standing still. So
That's absolutely.
you can say that in life, you can say that with software adoption,
Yeah.
with almost everything. Yeah.
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 Yeah, absolutely.
So this is more of a philosophical question. we, either our society or maybe just construction as a whole, I feel like people take a sense of pride in the home that they build, or owners itself, the building that they pay for, that it's under their name. There's a sense of pride associated with that, and they want to put their own fingerprint on it. So they want every building to be slightly unique, something that stands out compared to the buildings around it. So how do you balance that idea that buildings need to be unique because of the individuals that are in them and the people that pay for them, but they also need to be standardized in order for us to improve efficiency in construction?
It's great. It's a great question because it's one that, because I've watched a bunch of technology being developed, and and people trying to be very sort of rigid in the approach of um, certain things, like certain designs. You want to use this, and it results in a very repetitive look in the marketplace, which that's a pretty hard sell to developers, right? And in any development community, you're always going to have the influences of the city, and the planning community that are going to drive the ultimate aesthetic of the building. But not only that, from a competitive side, you need to have this flexibility to create an environment that is pleasing to the people that, you're trying to rent to, or whatever sort of drivers you have in that design development process. Setting that aside, because I think that's always going to be the case. I think you have to have flexibility in design, and to get buy-in from architects, you need flexibility in design, to say, this building has, this criteria to meet with the size of the lot and so forth. But if you take standard kitchen and bathroom sort of components and you've got them embedded into modules, but you have flexibility in the way I'm going to put these components together in a building to make up a building,
Or the
that's where,
skin. Yeah.
yeah, then you can skin it how you want. You can put decks on it. You can offset the building. You can do the things you need to get that uniqueness that you need in the building. So philosophically, I would say, as long as you can maintain flexibility in the layout of the building while still using standardized components that are building blocks that you get to use in that makeup, then you can actually achieve something that still has good manufacturing capabilities while giving that flexibility to the architect to be creative, right? Because that's, at the end of the day, the architect still wants to be creative. I mean, like,
Just let me throw a curve in there. Just please
what's
let me
that?
throw a curve.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's funny because when again, I'm going back to the automotive industry, but just think about the millions of identical cars all around the world. And we drive around the road and like, oh, that's the same car as mine and the other one. And we don't think twice about it. We just go
Right.
about our day. It doesn't bother us. But if we were in a house that is identical to 10 other houses in the neighborhood, it bothers people. We want our house to be unique.
So I would, and that I think is a great question too. At the same time, is we do want our house to be unique, but you know, 10 years from now or
Yeah,
15
can
years from
that's what I was
now,
trying to say. Can we guide people's thinking?
does it need to be
Does
unique?
it need to be unique?
Yeah,
Exactly.
because then you can get to a place that you say, okay, I can build that same thing now so much cheaper because I can put one out of the factory every, call it 5 minutes, right? And if I can do that, like an automotive factory, now we can drive down pricing.
Yeah.
Now we can actually get into mass production where we can do, thousands and thousands of homes more readily. That would make a big difference. That
Hmm.
would make a massive difference. And so I think that'd be the challenge, is to, and it's more of a consumer question than it is anything, right? And maybe it's not multifamily, maybe it's something smaller, but it really is the question of, do we look at it differently? Do we have something that goes together easily, goes together more seamlessly? It is very standardized, and you can get it in 3 colors, and you have the Mercedes version of it and the, Chevy Impala version of it, right? And so I I actually philosophically believe we can get there. Um, I think it just has to be, at this juncture where everybody feels enough pain that
Yeah,
I'm willing to
they're
buy
willing to
that.
compromise a little bit.
Yeah, I'm willing to buy that,
Exactly. Not
and then
compromise, maybe just change their expectations almost. Like,
that's
yeah,
right, that's right. And I think it just depends on what it looks like, and
absolutely.
right,
Yeah. So I came across this term a couple of, I think I was reading a book on gamification. And it's this idea of making a task seem more appealing because it's like you're playing a game through it, and there are different levels that you need to unlock, and it keeps the person interested. And I remember where I came across it. I was doing the well exam, and it's the idea of like discouraging people from taking the elevator and taking the stairs instead by making the stairs seem more inviting. And like it encourages physical activity and
right.
yeah. So I feel like you're kind of doing that with prefab logic, with the digital twin, with walkthroughs, like wearing AR glasses or something and walking through the building, because the next generation that's coming in, you need to attract them. Otherwise, they're going to try to find a career on YouTube or something that's more appealing to them. So
Right.
gamification through the use of software could encourage more talent into the industry.
Yeah, I believe that's true. Um, we don't have enough people in the industry right now.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and we need sort of every advantage we can to attract the people into our industry that we can, and certainly by utilizing the things we do in this sort of digital twin environment, and we're using both AR and VR, constantly every day to review, and then we actually use that to do reviews with our customers to make sure, early on
Oh,
that they
that's
can.
another, yeah, that's another selling point to to the
Right.
clients too.
Exactly. And so I think that's also going to keep um, pushing further and further. I mean, even today, it's so much more realistic when you're looking at it than it was even 3 years ago. The quality of what you're looking through, looking at in these VR and AR sort of environments have come a long way, and our ability to actually produce that and put it onto the production line so that the people on the production line can actually look at it as they're building to know that they're doing it correctly. These things, even out there in the production environment, it makes the younger people feel more digital, if
Yeah.
you will. I don't know how else to say it,
Yeah.
but it makes it more appealing,
Yeah.
right? That they're working in a technological sort of company, and and it's an absolute fact. It is very attractive to the younger people.
Yeah. So, I guess, do you have any like final words of advice? Because there's always this feeling of like doom and gloom when I talk to people in construction or I go to conferences. It's like, we're not doing enough efficient. We're not being productive. We're not being as efficient as we can be. Our carbon footprint is way too high. It's, and I feel there's just, when I talk to you and y'all are, there's companies that are constantly innovating, constantly trying to do better. It's not all doom and gloom. There's so much innovation going on in construction, but you just have to identify it. And do you have any words of advice for people who are looking for the bright light or the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess,
Sure. I mean, well, one is, be a part of it, right? Be a part of that growth, and
as
bring
opposed
your
to just being a critic?
yeah, and bring your ideas. But two is explore. It's very easy to be trapped in the way we've always done it, right? And building is definitely one that we haven't invested a lot in technology, right? And construction. But and while we're doing a lot of sort of software upgrades and these sorts of things, these are great, but it also takes the idea behind it. You have to have something that actually leads to a result that is going to improve the lives of the people in the industry that are actually building and creating the product that goes out to the field, right? How can we make that better? Like, how can we make it take less time. Right now, we've got major housing shortages all over the world. In fact, you'd like to think that we're the only ones with a problem here in the U.S., but it's really everywhere. How can you be a part of that and delivering that? Not just a phone app of making that easier, but how do you actually get to the bottom line of what this person is, as a person working in the field, how are you making their job better and easier so that they can be more productive and do twice as much as they would have otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really what's going to infuse this industry and help us produce more housing.
Yeah. It's conversations like these that really make me love being in construction and appreciate the difficulties of it, and just how much it impacts, like you talked about, you're making an impact on people's lives, on the future of construction, and on their housing. There's just it's a beautiful industry to be in. But
Really. Yeah,
thank you.
really is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us, Curtis. And I'm gonna look out for any new software updates any new software that you choose to adopt at Prefab Logic. And we should definitely have you back on the podcast soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Blenda. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Curtis.